Good morning. Here we are at the unit 1 of the introduction to semiotics, which is a 2 weeks course. We are at the first unit of this 2 weeks course. Semiotics is a Greek origin word used for the first time in modern sense by John Locke in his book An Essay Concerning Human Understanding. John Locke considers it the third branch of science which deals with the nature of signs used by human mind for understanding things or conveying knowledge to others. Now, there are three central questions in this definition. One, what is the nature of signs? How signs are or can be used epistemologically to get knowledge? How signs can be used to convey any thought or idea? This is termed as logic, L-O-G-I-K-E, or in contemporary language, L-O-G-I-C, logic by John Locke. Now, when we see the nature of sign, the issues related to nature of sign, one is we have to study here what is a sign and signifier and signified. These three concepts are very important in this concept. Signifier is the physical aspect of sign. Signified is the concept related to meaning assigned to signifier. Thus, signifier is the chain of phonemes used in a language, and signified is the concept related to the chain of phonemes. By extending the concept of signifier and signified in a language, we understand that signifier is the physical form of the text. Each identifiable element of a text is a sign. The physical form of that identifiable element is signifier, and the concept related to it is signified. Here we should try to understand the difference between reading versus receiving, because semioticians, in semiotics, we often prefer the word reading the text to receiving or understanding the text, because reading is essentially a conscious effort on the basis of how we have learnt to read. In semiotics, anything or any idea that communicates is a text, and we have to read, we have to learn to read the text which we have undertaken before ourselves. Semiotic reading of a text allows us to organize or reorganize the signs in a text. We have to decipher the elements of text and organize or reorganize the elements or units of meaning, often called the units of signification, so as to build up the structure of signification in the text. This implies that the meaning and aesthetics of the text is largely dependent upon the structure or organization of signs by reader of the text. Pay attention here that the reader of the text can restructure, can reorganize the signs that he or she can decipher from the text. Semiotic reading of a text allows us to go beyond the text once we have identified the units of signification in the text. In semiotics, communication is studied less as a process and more with the viewpoint of generation of meaning. In an act of communication, the message is the stimulus for recreating meaning of the text that is related in some way the meaning generated as a response to the stimulus. That means the one who emits the stimulus, the one who utters a particular message, a particular sentence or a particular word in a particular context, emits the signs basically, and then the one who understands also receives those signs and then reads them, then reinterprets them. In fact, the one who emits is himself or herself, is oneself a receiver or a reader of the sign also. So, semiotics is a systematic and scientific study of signs. As per the definition given by John Locke, cited earlier, we have already talked about it, we can say that semiotics has three main areas of study. 1. Types of sign. 2. Different ways in which signs relate to each other for conveying meaning or meanings. 3. The ways in which signs relate to people who use them. 2 more areas of study are related, which we should look at in the context. 1. The codes of systems in which signs have been organized. When we study the codes or systems of organization of signs to understand or exploit the channels of communication, this becomes a field of multimedia semiotics. The second field, which is also of interest here, is the culture, rather the cultural context or contexts in which the signs operate. This is cultural semiotics. So, multimedia semiotics and cultural semiotics are also 2 other important areas we undertake mostly in the field of semiotics, apart from the 3 areas about which we have all talked earlier. 1. Types of signs, different ways in which signs relate to each other, and the way signs relate to the people who use them. These 3 main areas remain important also in multimedia semiotics and cultural semiotics, but owing to the nature of inquiry, multimedia semiotics and cultural semiotics themselves become an interesting area of study within semiotics. Now we are going to study the concept of sign according to C.S. Peirce. C.S. Peirce, or Charles Sanderson Peirce, was an important American thinker who has worked in the field of semiotics with the viewpoint from philosophy. He was primarily a person trained in philosophy and was interested in the question of sign. For C.S. Peirce, every thought is a sign. Sign stands for something to somebody. A sign is something which stands to somebody for something in some respect or capacity. Sign creates in the mind of an individual an equivalent sign. This equivalent sign is called the interpretant of the sign. The sign stands for something, its object. So, these 2 are technical terms used by C.S. Peirce. One is interpretant, the other is object. In fact, there are 3 technical terms used by C.S. Peirce: interpretant, sign and object. So, sign, we have seen that it is that which stands to somebody for something in some respect or capacity. This is called by C.S. Peirce representamen. So, representamen is what we are calling sign today, the equivalent to sign, the label given to an object. Representamen is the name given by C.S. Peirce to the label, to the name, to the sign which stands for an object. The object is the item which is being referred to. That means object is something similar, somewhat similar to the signified in a way that which is being referred to. Now, it is not exactly signified, that we will see, because signified is more related to our concept, that we will see gradually. But here C.S. Peirce talks about the object and gives an importance to the object which is in the outside world, because he was a philosopher. Interpretant is another word which C.S. Peirce has used, which is the idea or concept which is more like the signified. You can see the diagram on your screen. In the diagram, you have interpretant, which is the idea or the concept. There is an object, which is the item being referred to, and then there is a sign, which is actually the label being given to the object. After this, we come to the concept of Ogden and Richards triangle. Ogden and Richards were 2 British, again 2 British who worked in the field mainly of philosophy, but were interested on linguistic questions. So, they have given the 3 terms called reference, referent and symbol. Now, reference is that mental concept based on the cultural and individual experiences which recognize the referent. Now, referent is the object being referred to, and symbol is the physical form, for example, a word in a language which is used to refer to the referent. Look at the screen for understanding Ogden and Richards triangle. On the screen you can see that there is referent, there is reference, and there is a symbol on 3 vertices of the triangle. The line between referent and reference is a continuous line, whereas the line between referent and symbol is an imputed one. The relationship between reference and symbol is also represented by a continuous line. Now, the imputed line stands for this fact that the relationship between referent and symbol can be an imputed one, whereas the relationship between referent and reference, that means thought and the referent, is a causal relationship based on convention, and also the relationship between reference and symbol is a causal relationship also based on convention, maybe arbitrarily. So referent is like Peirce's object, reference is like Peirce's interpretant, and symbol is like Peirce's representamen or sign. Now you can see that Peirce's object is called referent by Ogden and Richards, Peirce's interpretant is called reference by Ogden and Richards, and Peirce's representamen is a symbol in the triangle proposed by Ogden and Richards. Now we come to the third important semioticians of recent times, who has actually made a huge change in the way we look at the things, in the way we study various disciplines. This linguist is Ferdinand de Saussure. He has given the concept of sign. That sign has 2 aspects, signifier and signified. So signifier is the physical existence, is the physical aspect, and signified is the mental concept. These 2 together will propose the act of signification, which will give us the meaning. Meaning means here that which refers to the external reality. Look at the point here, that I am not saying that meaning is the external reality, but meaning refers to the external reality. In the earlier concepts, we have seen that there are words, there are technical names given to the object. In the concept of Saussure, who was primarily a linguistic and was not interested in the ontological world, Ogden and Richards and C.S. Peirce were interested in the ontological world as well as the epistemological processes to understand the ontological world, and hence they had a word or a term given for an object or an item which exists in reality, which is given to our perceptions. So their concepts of the triangle, of the communication process included the one concept for, one term for an external object, whereas in the concept of Ferdinand de Saussure, that term is missing. He is more concerned about the 2 aspects of sign, which are signifier and signified. So signifier is the chain of sounds primarily in language, and signified is the mental concept. Then there is an act of signification which gives us the meaning. Now there is a socio-cultural aspect to it. Both signifiers and signifieds are conditioned by socio-cultural aspects of communication. It is obvious that when we change the signifiers, that means the chain of the sounds, we are conditioned in a particular language. Different languages have different ways of juxtaposing signifiers. So signifieds are equally conditioned by the socio-cultural contexts. Signifiers can exhibit some amount of individual variations also based on the socio-cultural conditioning of individuals. Now we look at the act of signification. Now see, sign is a physical object with a meaning assigned to it. Signifier is the image or sign as perceived by our sense organs. Now signified is the mental concept to which the sign refers. The process by which the relationship between one individual's concept of sign and the physical reality is established is called the act of signification. Signifiers vary from one language to the other language. Hence, it is commonly understood that signifiers are a product of a particular socio-cultural setting of a particular speech community. Signifiers are equally a product of a particular socio-cultural setting of a particular speech community. Now, how a sign is understood? According to Saussure, the meaning of a sign is determined by how it is differentiated from other signs of the same system. That means that if you have to understand one sign, let's say sign X, then it will be understood as non-sign X1, non-sign X2. So, you will exclude all the possibilities, and then once you have excluded all the non-sign till Xn, you understand the concept of sign. So, each sign functions and is understood in a structural relation of all that particular sign does not signify, and is understood in a structural relationship of all that a particular sign does not signify. Now, here we understand that the signifier, which actually shows the physical existence, is composed of the units, the phonemic units, the sound units of a language. Then the signified varies from one community to the other community and also can vary from one person to the other, and signs are composed of the signifier and the signified, which through the act of signification bring us to an understanding which refers to the meaning or the external reality. For example, if we say tree in a British society, the signified may be different. We clearly understand that in an Indian society, let's say for paid in Hindi or in any other language, if we say the word for tree, it will be significantly different. It will be different from the sound, but not only on the basis of sound, even the concepts related around the tree will be different. So, we have to understand that the tree-ness as understood in the British society and the tree-ness as understood in the Indian society are essentially different. Now, in this context, we can also find some similarity between Saussure's notion of sign and the Peirce's notion of representamen. Both the thinkers seek meaning in a structural relationship. Ogden and Richards have not very clearly discussed this aspect of the structural relationship between various aspects of sign and their users, though they have also not denied or ignored it. For Saussure, a sign can be understood only in the context of other signs, that is, by negation of other signs. A sign is what it is not. A sign is understood by all that it does not signify. So, for understanding the Saussurean concept, we can ask a question: what is an ox? Linguistically, or rather semiotically, this question is actually what we mean by an ox. Linguistically, we can answer that this question can be what we do not mean by an ox in the Saussurean context. So, Saussure actually considers a new relationship of one sign with other sign in the same system. A particular sign in a system can be understood in relation to other signs. Therefore, the meaning of, let's say, ox is determined by how it is differentiated from other signs of the same system. That means all that ox does not signify, we exclude that, and after the exclusion of all that the ox would not signify, we arrive at the meaning of ox. So, each sign functions in the structural relationship with all the other signs which are to be excluded, which are not signified in that act of signification. So, signifier and signified are both equally distinctive and contrastive units standing in a particular structural relationship with other members of the signifier and the signified in a given communicative context. This aspect of Saussurean concept is often compared with the concepts of Apohvada Buddhists, and it is sometimes suggested that as Saussure was a scholar of Sanskrit who wrote his doctoral thesis on the use of genitive case in Sanskrit, may have originally assimilated the ideas of Indian semiotic and linguistic traditions in his thoughts. Let us summarize once all that we have learned today. In this unit, we have understood the basic concepts of semiotics. We have familiarized ourselves with the ideas of three important semiotic models, three important semioticians and the models proposed by them. One is C.S. Peirce, the second is Ogden and Richards, the third is Ferdinand de Saussure. These three represent three different traditions. C.S. Peirce represents the tradition of American studies on this, Ogden and Richards represent the British tradition on this, and Ferdinand de Saussure represents the French tradition on this. That French tradition which amalgamates many other European traditions also, which however are in some or the other way present also in the thought processes of C.S. Peirce and Ogden and Richards. Thank you.